Okay, Alternativerse has joined us, and Karl Koeller.
All right. Okay, thank you for all showing up here. Welcome. I will still give the introduction. My name is Karl Koeller. I'm the president at the Artist Collective of Hyde Park, right across from Virginia Trailey at Route 9 Hyde Park. We are a local gallery, the only gallery in Hyde Park. We've been here 11 years. We have 18 members. We're cooperative. And we have a new show every 2 months. The next one will be in March. And we have a new solo show every month. So I am the person for February. So thank you all for showing up. And enough about the gallery. Let's talk about me.
Yes.
Actually, seriously, I want to talk about the members of the gallery. And one of the benefits of being here is seeing the variety of the friendly family we have here at the gallery, and also the variety of artwork we have and the variety of skills. And what I find fascinating is everybody has a different approach to how they do their artwork. Let's say our sculptor, Carl Greco, he looks at a block of marble different than Mark Greco. Grimaldi looks like looked at a horizontal, looks at one of his symbolic paintings. And a watercolor, and Ilga does her abstracts different than John Bannis does his abstracts. Everybody has a different approach. So my subject matter is usually very different because I'm a graphic designer, illustrator, cartoonist. I have a very different approach to how I do my art and how much things. So what I want to talk about today is my thought process. I'm a product of the 60s. I was a late boomer. I was raised on newspaper comic strips, comic books, and good old Saturday morning cartoons. And so that was a strong influence. Funny animals, a lot of action, animation, and superheroes. That was actually my art at school, basically, because I learned anatomy from superheroes in skin-tight costumes. So you see all the muscles, and so it was actually my art school. I have a collection of 8,000 comic books. I started collecting when I was 11 years old. So that was my art school, and I really have a love for newspaper comic strips, and I'll talk mostly about that. One of the things that I find interesting is that the United States did not invent comic strips, but we sure got newspaper comic strips awesome and blooming in the early part of the 20th century, because newspapers were popular, they were very competitive, and people would collect and buy newspapers because of the funnies, because of the comic strips. And that became such a popular part, and they were very competitive, and if you got syndicated, you really were a successful comic strip artist. And sooner or later, the comic section became its own thing, and they would fold it, sell it, and then that's the story of comic books. And that was, again, a very strong American institution. Ken Burns, he does all his documentaries on the Civil War, baseball, jazz, and Vietnam. He should do a documentary on comics, because that is really a United States phenomenon. So the reason I still do my comic books, my cartoons, the same way they did back at the beginning of the 20th century. A comic artist would work on a piece of bristleboard about this big, and then they would be the writer, they would be the artist, they would be the inker, they would be the letterer, they would be the colorist, and then they had to be the marketing as well. So they would send it off to a newspaper, and then they get it. If they got syndicated, they were successful. So I did the same technique when I was doing. I have a Gunky Mouse comic book that I've run. Let me show one.
No, you don't have one.
I'm scared of Gunky Mouse.
And
I started doing a newspaper comic strip on him, and I decided that it worked better when it has a 6-panel format. So the first time I started working on my comic strip, I was doing the same exact method of the way they did comic strips back in the beginning, from the first 70 years of the 20th century. And if you look to the right there, that's one of the samples of the pages I did. Full size, 11 by 17. And you can still see the light pencil mark. I did everything with an ink brush and a quill pen. I used a T-square to get the lines for the guiding of it and the handwritten type. You can see white out. And you can also see little samples of zipatone, which is a way you can add texture onto a comic strip. So eventually I just took it to a printer and we reduced it down 11 by 17, and that's what you see, or 8.5 by 11, that's what you see here. So that's an example of how my approach to comic strips. And most of my comics I still do with a number 2 pencil and a piece of copy of paper. Let me hand this around. This is a sample of a comic strip that's printed, but if you look at it closely, you can see the original blue pencil lines, and you can see the guidelines for the type. And that's how comic books were done all the way until the 70s and 80s. With a T-square. So eventually I started figuring out that since my panels were all, all my comics were 6 panels, that's just the way the format worked, I figured each panel was its own image, their own comic. So I started doing 8.5 by 11. So that's what you see on the left there. Each drawing, that's the actual size that I drew it on, 8.5 by 11, little number 2 pencil on copier paper. But every time I draw something, I have to draw it 4 or 5 times before I get the right pose. And then I do it dark in pencil. What I do then is I take the pencil, I scan it in the computer, and I can blast the color so the gray actually turns black. So I don't do any inking. I could still do inking but this way I can use the pencil, make it look black like it's ink. And then I take each of the images and I reduce it to how it fits into the 6-panel format. So later on you can look at that. So, and with my other artwork, every time you see one of these images, I've actually drawn it 4 or 5 times. I think that's something unique here. Most of the work that you see in the gallery here is original artwork. And so a lot of stuff, mostly I hand draw it, but then I enhance it in the computer. So that's one thing that you see here. What I wanted to talk about is a little bit, I'll give you 3 samples of how cartoonists think. Cartoonists think differently. We have to look at the world and make it interesting to put in artwork. We have to look at the absurd, we have to look at the ridiculous, we have to be optimistic and cynical. So my artwork doesn't exactly fit with newspaper comics or with comic books. So my artwork, single panel, just ends up in greeting cards. It's something, a quick image, you look at it, it makes you smile. It's not humorous. So that's why everything on the wall here is actually going to be the next set of my 10 greeting cards. I want to give you an example of, I wanted to think of something absurd. So I thought of something wavy, so I thought a hippopotamus on a pogo stick. Now I challenge anybody in the gallery here to do a drawing, a rendering of a hippopotamus on a pogo stick. So after, well, especially a sculpture. But I would love to see anybody, maybe that'll be the theme for our March show, hippopotamus on a pogo stick. So then I did, after several drawings and several versions, this is what I came up with. This is the original pencil drawing of a hippopotamus on a pogo stick. And I wanted to emphasize the forward movement, so I made it horizontal, landscape format. So this is the final version. I scanned it in the computer and I colorized it. And then I realized that to make it show weight, I wanted to show it vertically, show it more lifting. So where'd it go? So I colorized it, and then I made it vertically in landscape, I mean portrait. And I decided to tilt the head back, make it open the mouth, make it really. So this is the final version. All right. So this emphasizes the vertical, that he's up in the air, and he's happy. It's not hilarious, but at least you look at it, you smile. You know it's absurd, but that's the whole purpose, and that's the message I try to get across. I'm still not happy with it because I want to have something to show the forward trajectory. I was going to have like a scarf or a cape or something, a hat, something to show that it's still moving forward. But this is the thought process that goes into my art. Yeah.
When you talk about colorizing, do you color it by hand or do you do it on the computer?
I scan it in the computer, and this is all colorized in the computer. I actually add the texture with a little trick that I do in Photoshop. Because Photoshop and me are good friends. So that's one example of my thought process. One other example two other examples I want to show you. A lot of my birthday cards, on my greeting cards, you have different themes. One of them is going to be about birthday card. So if everybody does a birthday cake, so let's do something like a cupcake. How do you make a cupcake? let's make it a big cupcake. So I drew a big cupcake. How do you make a big cupcake look big? You have to have a small thing next to it. So maybe a mouse with a cupcake. And I thought, okay, let's have a girl. So instead of just having a girl standing next to a cupcake, I decided to have the little girl carry the cupcake. So this emphasizes the absurdity of it. And it also, and I thought, okay, maybe she's struggling. Maybe maybe I have her head hidden. Maybe I have her struggling to carry it. And I just said, let's make it happy. The other thing I want to emphasize is, again, there's motion. And I get this from animation. I always want to have action and motion in my images because that tells a story. Now when you look at it, is she happy because she's got the cupcake, or is she taking it to someone else for a cupcake? So anybody looks at this, they can interpret it their own way. There's a story. And those are the four things I like in my comics: is absurdity, and emotion, and then direction and potential for the story. So, and then one other sample, if you don't mind. What is this a picture of?
Who remembers?
No. It's actually, if anybody here went through the first grade, you know it's a polar bear in a snowstorm. And if you're a first grader, you tell this to a first grader, oh, that's hilarious to them. So I've always had that thought in my head, polar bear in a snowstorm. I said, what would make that interesting or different? So I thought, what if the polar bear were camouflage? So then the whole purpose of camouflage is defeated because of it. So again, we have the absurdity of it. I was thinking of just having the jacket there and then everything else would be white. But you want to have the happy polar bear, show the, there's not really a story there, but then again, happy thing. You look at it, it's not funny, but it just makes you smile. So that's again, my thought process. That's how I approach art. Does anybody have any questions about anything that they've seen or how I think or do?
Well, how did you even just learn how to do these drawings? You just did it on your own?
I've been drawing since I could hold a pencil. I sat in front of the TV and I drew what I saw on TV. I drew comic books. I've been drawing my whole life. And mostly what I draw is funny animals and humans. They don't have to be superheroes, but I do have anatomy. I like action poses. People who do portraits or still life, I could never do that because I want the person doing something. And if you have a bowl of fruit, I mean, it's nice technical detail painting, but it's just sitting there. I want the fruit to be bouncing and doing something. I want action. I want a story. And so, and that's part of the comic books and animation. I studied animation. I would love to do a talk about animation if anybody wants to show up another Saturday. But it's just drawing. And so I was strongly influenced by Walt Kelly's Pogo. That's the comic strip from the 70s, from 50s to 70s, and that was almost too much of an influence on my artwork with Walt Kelly's Pogo. Funny animals, use of language, very animated.
Do you think you inherited some of this from one of your parents or family?
There is art in my family. My uncle was a graphic designer. My father was a draftsman. So I inherited a lot of his tools, like the T-square and the compass and all the technical stuff. And my father worked for a local computer company, which will go nameless, and he would come home with blank paper, big pieces of blank white paper. So I just sat there and took another stack of paper, and I just drew all day long. That's what I did as a kid, and that's what I loved, and I still love it. That's my story. Yeah.
I like that one over there.
On the bottom?
You know, no, the stone.
Oh, that, yeah.
That one?
Yeah. It's my eye.
This one is it's actually a two-story to it. Ilga Demon Curtains brought in a set of Pantone samples, which is a whole bunch of rectangles of all the colors in the world. And I saw that there and I said, you gotta take advantage of it somehow. So I sat there, OCD, and I just cut out all the little rectangles and I arranged it by color. just figured, okay, I make orange to blue, or so kind of. And that's how I had the original image, was that of orange to blue. Then I wanted some contrast. I love George O'Keeffe's cityscapes, and I've always been intrigued by them. And so I decided just to make some, in contrast mostly, just to have some black, dark black and white as opposed to colorful. And so that's just a contrast. It's an experiment, really, but I like it.
I see, to me, I see stones being waited to be carved.
There you go.
That's what I see.
Well, I like it because I like the way that you blend it and mix up the colors.
See, I
Very, very artistic.
I sat there and got all the oranges over here and the dark blues over here.
Well, it did more than that, because you pulled it down to the yellow, and then when you had pink, and you had, it's very,
Yeah.
very good.
And it really does look like a sunset because of where you put the shadows and the fact that you've got the light at the bottom.
When, my parents are from Chicago, and every summer we went and visited Chicago. And I remember at nighttime the sky was orange, probably from the street lights or the lights. And I'd never seen an orange sky before, so I always remember the sky being orange. So that's the reason why I call it Chicago's. Even though these aren't specifically Chicago buildings, but it's definitely sky.
Can you tell us about the one in the corner, the black and white?
This one?
Yeah.
This was actually published as from an article. Someone was an article about someone being lonely in prison, or just men in prison. And this is all hand drawn, hand inked. You can see I did some splattered texture here. Except when we had our jury show, it was about dreams. So I added this little shadow. The shadow was not originally there. Yeah, but he's thinking or dreaming or something like that. The original concept for the magazine was, and this is the original size I drew it. When it was published, it was this big. It gets shrunk down.
Where was it published?
In a small press publication, a small press magazine. And that's the advantage of having your artwork shrunk down, is if you have a wiggly line, sometimes make it look straight, you get to add more detail, and when it's reduced, the detail comes out. So this was originally a magazine masthead. But it's all hand rendered.
Yes, shadow or.
I thought reaching out, in a
It's
more
good.
positive way.
Very nice.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate everybody showing up.
Any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions?
Any questions from anybody on the Zoom? Carol or Alterniverse?
Okay. My artwork will be here through the first weekend of March. So anybody come, the gallery is open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So thank you again, and come back and visit again. So.
Well, you got a hand coming in. You got a hand.
Hey, hello.
Hi, hello.
Welcome.
I didn't do the topics, so.